KBTC, a viewer-supported community service of Bates Technical College.
From KBTC Public Television Studios in Tacoma, Washington. Welcome to the Steve on the Street podcast, a closer look behind the headlines as public policy and current affairs impact the real lives of real people.
Hello, and welcome to the Steve on the Street podcast, produced by KBTC Public Television's Public Affairs program, Northwest Now. I'm your host, reporter and photojournalist Steve Kiggins. Today's episode of the podcast is really quite a treat. Joining me on the podcast is John Keister and Ross Schaefer, both former hosts of the iconic and locally produced comedy television show Almost Live. This summer, I received a gracious opportunity to ride to the top of Seattle's Space Needle to rub elbows with a handful of those who made history in the Seattle television broadcast industry. Almost Live ran from 1984 through 1999 on Seattle's NBC affiliate King 5. The show also aired on the Comedy Central cable channel for a couple years, but Almost Live was ultimately canceled after King Broadcasting Company was sold to the then Texas company Belo Corporation. And under subsequent ownership, King 5 continued to air reruns of Almost Live, and the show can now be found on streaming channels online. In the 2010s, a short-lived successor to Almost Live, called The 206, ran for a short time with several familiar faces showcased on screen. Almost Live's first host, Ross Schaefer's wake, caused waves back in 1984 by coming shockingly close to changing the state's official song to Louie Louie, and later on, when, donned in gorilla suits, climbed to the top of the Space Needle in protest of an inflated gorilla which sat right on top. Years later in 1989, when John Keister was then host, an April Fool's Day prank stunned viewers across the region after they watched a fake news report that told viewers the Space Needle had collapsed. Of course, the Space Needle did not collapse, but the prank still receives notoriety nearly 30 years later. So, Almost Live will soon be celebrated locally with an exhibit inside Seattle's Museum of History and Industry starting at the end of August, showcasing props and costumes, show notes and clips of the show, and much more. Earlier this summer, nearly the entire cast from the show's original run were brought together back at the Space Needle, where Seattle Times planned a photo shoot with the show's cast and crew. Next on the podcast, take a listen to our coverage on Northwest Now. The rumble of memories past builds to giggles.
Doesn't matter how many decades we're in between.
Yeah, you get together with this group of people and everybody instantly you remember all the stuff we did.
The comedians who trailblazed local television history on King 5's Almost Live reunited this June. Nearly every member of the show's cast came together at Seattle's Space Needle. That's right. A Northwest icon that often became a punchline on TV.
Our head writer, Jim Sharp, said this like 30 years ago. He goes, these are the good old days.
Yeah.
And it was prophetic in a way. That now all this time has passed, and he was right. And demand.
Almost Live hit the air in 1984 with Ross Schaefer as host. When an inflatable gorilla loomed atop the needle, the team took the wind out of the ape.
Let's go, boys!
We interrupt.
Later in 89, when John Keister was host, an April Fool's Day skit tricked viewers when a fake news report claimed the needle had toppled.
Bummer about the needle.
We've attacked the needle many times over the years.
Yeah.
It's always been kind of a comic staple, and for some reason they went along with us.
Okay, everybody.
Almost Live lampooned local stereotypes and rivalries. A Seattle Times photo shoot captured the cast reunion where one Seattle icon birthed another, all to celebrate the show's exhibition at Seattle's Museum of History and Industry.
Just think it's really cool that we're now going to be part of that big collection. It feels very nice. It feels good.
Yeah, that feels good until we learn that Bill Nye...
He's getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
He also has a live exhibit at the Smithsonian.
Yes, he
museum.
Continues to live his Forrest Gump life, just sort of
right.
walking through...
Speed walking right through all of it.
Speed walking through it all, yes.
At Seattle Center, Steve Kiggins, Northwest Now. So, Almost Live will soon be celebrated locally with an exhibit inside Seattle's Museum of History and Industry starting at the end of August, showcasing props and costumes, show notes and clips of the show, and much more. Earlier this summer, nearly the entire cast from the show's original run were brought together back at the Space Needle, where Seattle Times planned a photo shoot with the show's cast and crew. KBTC's Northwest Now was also invited as a guest of Seattle Times to their photo shoot, and that's where former Almost Live hosts Ross Schaefer and John Keister joined me for an interview. Take a listen. When's the last time all of you kind of had the same opportunity to be together like this?
Oh boy, it's been decades. It's been a long time since the entire cast has gotten together. It's been a very long time.
But it's just so great to see everybody, isn't it?
It's great to see everybody.
You know how
here.
it's like when old friends, you just pick up right where you left off. It doesn't matter how many decades we're in between.
That's
what it feels like.
No, I mean, you get together with this group of people, and everybody instantly you remember all the stuff we did running around town.
Right, all the little bits.
Yeah.
Running around town, acting without permits.
Yeah,
at
no
all.
permits. Just,
and live gunware.
Yes, we had a lot of stuff, a lot of interesting props.
Does it feel like you're an institution?
It feels like we're in an institution sometimes, but institutionalized.
There was our head writer, Jim Sharp, said this like 30 years ago. We were doing something somewhere, and he goes, these are the good old days.
Yeah.
And it was prophetic in a way. That now all this time has passed, and he was right.
Yeah, he said, I believe we're living the good old days.
That's right.
That's really something they're there before you know it.
Yeah.
They're happening as they're happening.
Yeah.
You don't really quite recognize.
Well, I mean, to me, I think the show, it influenced this area in a lot of ways that people don't really there's a lot of the comic vocabulary of this area came from the show, and people, when they say things about, things about the Ballard and Kent and just the kind of stuff that the jokes we made, we set kind of a like I say, a language for the area.
It's connecting. Yes, I maybe I don't understand it, but I know when I go to Ballard, some idiot can't drive.
Right.
I know what that's like.
Yeah.
We may have not been smart enough to realize how connective that was in real time, but by finding the personalities within these communities, it really created a loyal fan base.
Yeah.
There was almost a little bit, if you're Renton, you're against Ballard. If you're Ballard, you're against Snohomish. I mean, there was all kinds of things that really worked in our favor.
Yeah, I mean, and not just a bunch of Tacoma jokes like people used to do. I'm serious, actually. That we kind of did almost know very few Tacoma jokes because we both, I think, wanted to shift that. That's what, that had been sort of a thing forever, and it was like, there's more stuff.
Are you surprised they let you up there?
We've attacked the needle many times over the years.
Yeah.
It's always been kind of a comic staple, and for some reason they went along with us.
Yeah.
I think that gave us a kind of a power, having that TV show, thinking, those guys are harmless, they'll be in and out, which we were, but they never heard exactly what we said. We attacked with the gorilla suits one day and walked around on the upper deck.
Yeah, we were in the Space Needle a lot, actually. They were mad initially when it fell over, but then they got such publicity. They got such big publicity over it that I was in an event a couple of years ago, and the guy who was the manager at that time came up to me and just said that was the greatest day of the spin. We all look back on that, and I was like, okay,
There's something to be said about a locally produced television program in the Northwest through the years that you did it. No other media around the country did something.
No, there's
Not to
only
mention today, it's almost. Does it feel bigger than all of us?
Well, in a way, I think that the show, it at the time we were on, I think that it had a much wider audience than I think even we anticipated. There was something else I wanted to say, but I'm old. Let's see.
But there is something about Almost Live where if you know, there's a core group of people who watched every episode and remembers bits we forgot we even made. Over and over.
They memorize the lines.
They do. In my time, it was the Louie campaign was a really big deal, and that put us one step up on the map.
Yeah.
And John with the Space Needle collapsing was those signature moments people still talk about.
Uh-huh.
Also, what was working in our favor was there were only 4 channels.
Yeah,
TV
yeah,
at that time.
No
Right, there's no
cable,
streaming, there's no YouTube, right? You
There's
had to
all
watch,
that.
boy.
That's right.
So you had them really by the neck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is there was the only other show I knew of that did that was local and did comedy was Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
and
totally different animal, though, right?
yeah, completely different.
Yeah.
And those were the only 2 local shows, as far as I know, that made it onto Comedy Central. So, you know, that's something. We're very proud that we're going to be enshrined in Mohai in the Museum of History and Industry. I used to love to visit it as a kid, and I just think it's really cool that we're now going to be part of that big collection. You know, feels very nice. You know, it feels good.
Yeah, that feels good until we learned that Bill Nye is in the.
Yeah, the Hollywood. He's getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which
And
you
he-
know,
and he
so,
had
so
an
he won't be
exhibit.
able to be here. So
He also has a live exhibit at the Smithsonian.
yes, and
So that's his version of,
yes, he
of a museum.
continues to live his Forrest Gump life, just sort of walking through,
Speed walking right through all of it.
speed walking
Yeah.
through it all. Yes.
You know, I've been so fortunate and privileged in my career to meet and interview so many fascinating and interesting people over the past couple decades, but getting the chance to chat with Ross Schaefer and John Keister that day in June rises to one of my all-time favorites. So again, thanks very much to Seattle Times, who invited Northwest Now along for their photo shoot. And of course, thanks to Ross Schaefer and John Keister for sharing a few thoughts on the success and legacy of Almost Live with me. And most of all, thank you. Thank you for taking the time and interest to spend your time here with me on the Steve on the Street podcast. Your continued support just by being here listening, it's very much appreciated. Again, thank you. I'm the host of the Steve on the Street podcast, photojournalist and reporter Steve Kiggins. And until then, we'll see you next time. Cheers.